his head must have been in Sweden because he was, McDonough was on the ice for 4 goals. I mean, they were just completely out of it, and they had been beaten to a crisp apparently by Columbus on Saturday night. So, I mean, the Leafs
That's
needed
joy
a
out of a Leafs fan right there. There you have it.
Yeah, well, you know, you got to give him credit because I thought, I wrote yesterday in my AM preview, I really felt like that there is a sense of urgency that the Maple Leafs had to have. I mean, it's ridiculous to say that for the third game into the season, but Pierre Laviolette was fired at 0-3.
Yeah, right. That's right.
I mean, it's to and it's to the point of stupidity, and a number of columnists in Toronto commented on it. So I think I should be
we are
free
live
to comment on it.
So.
I know.
Okay, good.
That on Saturday night, a fan threw a Leafs jersey on the ice in the third period.
Thing, right? They do that in Edmonton now. That's like becomes a thing now to do.
Right, and I quipped during the game. Apparently, that person went to the supermarket and they were out of frozen waffles, because that was the means of protest a couple years ago when Ron Wilson was the coach. They threw Eggo waffles on the ice, and now apparently there's a full body search for waffles at the Air Canada Center. But give me a break. It is 2 games into the season. I don't even expect Buffalo Sabres fans to give up hope after 2 games. Maple Leaf fans, this team is probably going to be life or death for the playoffs. Calm down. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so they go from the low of looking absolutely horrible against Pittsburgh on Saturday to scoring 5 goals in the second period against the Eastern Conference champion Rangers. Somewhere in the middle is where the team really is. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It was impressive, though. I mean, that goal surge was pretty impressive. Although, they were still sloppy, I felt, defensively. And, they're a hard team to get a read on. They really are. So I thought what was more interesting was the Don Cherry rant.
Well, I was going to comment on that.
Want to bring that up?
Yeah.
Let's just start.
Let's start the show. Let's go.
Let's start the show. Sounds good. We'll go.
Monday, October 13th.
It is October 13th. Michael, Kevin, Josh, in that order. Got it?
Got it.
Josh, if you find any news for us, let us know. We'll go through this whole thing. Here we go. Ready?
And we'll do that.
Excellent. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, October 13th, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the Hockeybuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. Coming to you live today from Philadelphia, Toronto, Ann Arbor, and Cheektowaga. I've
moved to Buffalo.
Oh, you're not in Cheektowaga anymore?
No, born and raised in Cheektowaga, but living in Buffalo. I've climbed
a town called Cheektowaga.
I've climbed the social strata. I'm in Buffalo now.
All right. Well, I'm just a little worried about you, Kevin, in the Midwest, because I was watching the Weather Channel, and there is the way they described it on the Weather Channel is a dangerous outbreak of weather this week coming to us in America. You all right?
Yeah, I am just fine. It is raining, so my dog is hiding, though. He's a Nicola who's afraid of the rain, so he hides out when it's raining. And he's a great weather barometer because he starts hiding about 2 to 2.5 hours before the rain comes. He can just feel it. It's coming, and he knows it, and he gets out a good hiding space. He likes underneath my desk. He likes the bathroom, and he went early today. He just decided, he told me. It must
be a low pressure thing. He must got it because this is a really seriously low pressure system, right? So.
Yep. He feels it, and he feels at any moment the ark will come for us, and we'll have to climb aboard.
These are the end days for your dog. I know he's saying his Hail Marys in the closet, and this is the outbreak to me. I love the Weather Channel. They have 2 hits. This is what I figured about the Weather Channel. Real quick, my rant about the Weather Channel. They've got 2 hits. They've got hurricanes, of course. Hurricanes are the big money maker for weather channels, and when they hit America, that's huge. But they'll cover any hurricane, like a typhoon hitting the coast of Alaska, or the typhoon hitting the coast of Japan. But And then after that are blizzards, right? Because blizzards people always are, or snowstorms people are always afraid of. But now they have really tried, because those things don't happen all that often, to really like. So now rainstorms have become outbreaks of weather,
Yeah.
which to me sounds like poison monkeys have been released on the country, but it's just a rainstorm, and it's going to rain a lot over the next couple of days, and that's true. That's true, you know. And then of course last year we had the world famous, polar vortex, right, which is also known as winter. But, yeah, polar vortex, which is when it gets colder in December and January and February.
All I know is that I've heard that the polar vortex is coming back again this year, and I'm like, yes, of course it is. It's called winter. I mean, geez.
It's like, and they try to hook onto global warming, but that's like a little too far out there. And then the Weather Channel itself just does nothing but have like freaky videos on it, like what are these green balls doing on the coast of Alaska? All these crazy YouTube videos.
I still would like to get the explanation of how the average temperature went down last year, but that is a sign of global warming. It's like if it's warmer, it's a sign of global warming, but if it gets colder, it's a sign of global warming too. It's like you can never win the argument, because anything that changes from the supposed norm is a sign of global warming, which I think is crap, but okay.
That's a very, very radical view on global warming you have there, Mike.
Very analytical. Very
analytical. I agree with it. I'm fine with it. But anyway, we'll get on to hockey. But that's my thing. So they're trying desperately to get another hit. Like this is the Weather Channel needs another. They need another scare thing. And they're praying that hail will go through some baby carriage somewhere and just completely drive the fear of day, because people are absolutely lost their minds. Well, anyway, we're into the season, and I thought one of the things that would be fun to talk about today would be the teams that are kind of surprising us a little bit from our predictions last week, and the teams that are maybe, a little bit disappointing. We talked a little bit about the Maple Leafs in the beginning of the show there, if you were judging the pre-show, and that's a little bit of, I think they're kind of right where I thought they'd be, in my mind. But we can start with them. Mike, is that where you think? I mean, it's 2 games.
I just think that the reaction so far towards the Leafs is just a product of Toronto, product of the uncertainty of this franchise right now. I didn't think they played a bad game on Wednesday against Montreal in the season opener. They just allowed a late goal, and Montreal won the game. They played terribly against Pittsburgh. They came out, Pittsburgh, they took a bunch of stupid penalties. Pittsburgh's power play was operating on all 8 cylinders. Crosby, Hornquist, Malkin, they ran it up. The Leafs really weren't in the game until the second period. Bernier didn't look good. He's let in 2 soft goals as the opening goal in his first 2 starts. Last night was a complete flip. As I said, the Rangers were without a couple of their key players. Lundqvist was not sharp. Ryan McDonough was on the ice for 4 of the 6 Toronto goals. Both teams had played the night before. Toronto seemed to have more jump and more desperation, which I think was in part to Randy Carlyle benching Jake Gardiner, who they had signed to a 5-year contract this summer. They brought back Cody Franzen. Rookie Stuart Percy, who was their first-round pick from 3 years ago, is playing really well. Really, real smart kid, real calm on the ice, makes good decisions, and he gives Carlisle some options. So what he did was he sat Gardner. He moved Daniel Winnick up to the second line to give Kadri and Lupo a little more defensive cover. And they took advantage of the Rangers the night that they raised their Eastern Conference banner. So, I mean, it was sort of a mixed bag for the Leafs, but I think it's going to be that way all year, and I think fans who are already predisposed to wanting Randy Carlisle's head on a platter, they're going to be calling for him to get fired if they have a 2-game losing streak, and those who think this team are going to make the playoffs, when they've won 2 or 3 in a row, they're going to be planning the parade route on Yonge Street. So it's going to be up and down all year. So I'm fully prepared for it.
Yeah, I think you have to be.
I'm going to sound the alarm bell a little bit on the Maple Leafs, and just from this perspective, like I agree with what Mike said in terms of where they're at. They're a C- defensive team, and I'm talking about defensive play, not the blue line itself.
Right.
They're a B scoring team, and then their goaltending is it a B plus? Is it a B? Is it a C plus? We really are not going to know. So we kind of know what they're at. But the one alarm that I would sound is their problem last year certainly was their defensive play. They were very inconsistent, and I see signs of that again. And the one thing that I think a coach can fix is a team's defensive play. That's why every new coach who comes in usually has some measure of success, because generally what he does is he forces everybody to play a little bit more conservatively and prevent goals against, because that's the one thing he can have an impact on. So I'm just a little bit alarmed that the Maple Leafs still seem to be playing pretty sloppy defensive hockey at times. But saying all that, like, do I think they're right on the edge of the playoffs in the East? Yeah, I do. I mean, they're if Bernier has a good season, if they score enough goals, if they improve a little bit defensively, they're right in that 11 to 8 or to 7 range, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and their top line didn't show up in the first 2 games, didn't register a point other than Bozak on a power play. Kessel and Van Riemsdyk didn't score a point in the first 2 games. Last night, I believe they combined for 4 points. So yeah, and the thing was that they brought in 2 veteran defensemen in Robidas and Roman Polak to play with the young guys, and then because of Franzen's injury, they played Gardner and Riley together, and they were a combined -6 in the first 2 games. So they had to switch things around. Carlisle did. I think it's sort of going to be a feeling out process with that team because there's so many new people. But and they did have a relatively tough beginning of the season with Pittsburgh, Montreal, and the Rangers in the first 3 games, and now they have Colorado tomorrow, and then a home and home with Detroit. It gets a little easier going forward toward the end of the month. So I mean, we'll see where they stand at the end of October, and then I think it's probably a little more accurate to make a determination at that point.
I've also been disappointed with the play of Jonathan Bernier. I don't think he's looked too solid in the nets, and Reimer looked okay last night. Obviously, he left early. Once again, a collision in front of the net, and they always worry about Reimer after he's taken a shot to the head because it's happened a couple times over the last couple years. But in my opinion, I think the Islanders might have supplanted the Leafs as a possible playoff-bound team with what they've done here right before the season started. I think the Islanders, look at the way they've been playing. They've been getting all these points out of guys like this kid Brock Nelson playing on the first line and been playing a lot with Tavares and Okposo. And Johnny Boychuk are the Bruins right now shaking their head and moving him.
Wow. Johnny Boychuk isn't exactly Drew Doughty in terms of offense. I mean, he had a good game or 2. He's primarily a defensive defenseman, so I don't think that's realism. I mean, I think it's just a game or 2.
Yeah, I'm going to argue a little bit on that. I mean, he's got a really hard shot, and he really didn't have the opportunity in Boston. I think he'll play more of an offensive role in the Islanders. I mean, I agree with your assessment. He's not going to be known as an offensive defenseman, but he's got a really good shot. It's a sharp shot, and I think his points totals will be up this season.
Yeah, I can see that too. I'm not. It's going to take me a little while on the Islanders. A lot has to do with who you play early on in the season here, and the Islanders are. I mean, they have the talent, and so far their young guys are coming through in a big way. I mean, the one team that I think stands out right now has got to be the Minnesota Wild. I mean, they in the two games, 2 shutout games. That's pretty crazy. And shutting out the Colorado Avalanche, which is probably in our brackets for teams to be worried about the most at the same time as we talk about this. But, the Wild, though, they just I'm starting to think that they're way better than I thought, Kevin. I don't know. That's where I am.
Well, I think we all thought they were going to be strong again. And I think adding Vanek, we said the other day, I think you and I both agreed on it, that this would be the best offensive team they've ever had. I think they were a little more efficient in all aspects of the game. That's the word I would use. I think they really just sort of ground them up in that game. Like, they just did everything offensively and defensively, and the goaltending was pretty solid. But I don't think you can talk about the Minnesota 2 wins without talking about what's going on with Colorado. And I wrote about that a couple of days ago. I think Patrick Waugh saw this coming, and I think he knew that with a young team, and we've seen it, anyone who's covered the league, has seen it. Sometimes when you win, and they won 21 goal games last season, whenever you do that, it's hard to come back and recapture that magic. Whatever you had, you can't define it. And so in order to try to get it back, you keep looking and searching, and it's really, really difficult. And I think it's really difficult if you're a young team. And, again, what I feel about the preseason. I think you can take nothing out of the preseason.
Yeah.
Again, saying that, I think Patrick Waugh knew. I don't have the figures right at my disposal, but I'm pretty sure that they've only, if you count the preseason and then what happened in the first 2 games, I think they've only scored like 10 goals in the last 10 games, counting the preseason.
Yeah. No, they weren't scoring in the preseason either. Yeah.
So I think Patrick Waugh, noted that. I think he sensed this was coming. I'm sure he's been working on it, but it's a hard thing to get your arms around. How do you restore the excitement level and the karma and the confidence, whatever you want to call it, that they had last season. So even though I am bullish on Minnesota as a playoff team, I thought they were one of my locks to get in the playoffs. I think it's still a little early yet to crown them, although they were very impressive, I thought, in those first 2 games.
Yeah, I'm with you. And, Crosby, Kemper, and Laconic were named 3 stars of the week this week. And that's pretty, but and Kemper, the big thing there, obviously, with Minnesota is the goaltending question, which everybody asked about. It doesn't hurt when your goalie comes out and pitches 2 shutouts. That kind of puts that question away, and maybe that isn't so bad. And Boston is playing Colorado as we speak, actually. That game started just a few minutes ago. We have not had a live game before on as we do the Hockeybuzzcast. I want to throw that out there. This is the first time we actually... And that says a lot about, the fact that, they're playing a game in Boston's day. A state that still celebrates Christopher Columbus, obviously. It has the day off today. We lost that. Our kids go to school. When I go to school now, we don't have Indigenous people day.
How do you know that the Bruins aren't celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving?
I guess that's what we'll call it. I like that. We'll say that's it. Maybe they have a day off for Indigenous People Day. We didn't get that yet, but they are playing. So that's not an easy. That's if you're the Colorado Avalanche, not the easiest place to go and play today. When you can't score goals. I mean, Bruins are one of the better defensive teams in the league. There's been some concern here in Philadelphia, and I think rightfully so to a degree, at least on the defensive end. The Flyers blew a 3-0 lead against the Montreal Canadiens on Saturday night. And just when things, looked like they were getting better and the team scoring goals, but a lot of that I was also very impressed with the Canadiens in that game and their ability to strike quickly. They scored 3 goals really fast, and Montreal's 3-0. And they're one of the few teams that are. Mike, what are your thoughts on the Canadiens right now?
Well, I mean, they were impressive in the opener. I only saw a bit of the game that they played against Philadelphia. Thomas Buchanan's has really started the season fantastic. I didn't expect that much offense out of him at this point. But they've played Tokarski one game. He played very well. Carey Price, we all know the quality of him. Say what you want about Peter Budaj, but Peter Budaj, when he did play as their backup, did give them quality starts as a backup goaltender. And if they can get that out of Tokarski for a lot less of a salary, they're gonna really benefit. But right now, Montreal, it looks to be in the form that they were when they were making their run in the playoffs. I'm a little surprised. Like I said, I thought that the veterans that left that team, and as we've all said, the departure of Gerard Gallant from Montreal to Florida would have some effect. But right now, they're playing great. But again, we're in the first week of the season. I'm not going to jump to judgments on them. I picked them to finish in the wild card. Right now, they're in first place in the Atlantic, so we'll see.
Yeah, no, there's a long way to go, obviously. Devin Dubnyk got a victory this weekend too. I thought an interesting story, and he beat the LA Kings of all teams. And Devin Dubnyk has, this is, like you said, it's got to be Mike Smith in Arizona, Kevin. But that's, maybe they got something. Maybe this is a place where Dubnyk can step up.
Yeah, no, I think though that for the Arizona team, it really is about Smith. He has to, play well. They're just not good enough offensively in my mind. They really need to have excellent goaltending, and they need to play really strong defensively as well. And basically, they just need to play the way that Dave Tippett likes to play, and they didn't do that particularly late last season. They were very sloppy, really uncharacteristic for a Tippett team or a Don Maloney team as a general manager. But I think the Coyotes are going to have a very difficult time making the playoffs. And it's the first week, and I try not to put too much stock into it. But in watching there, I haven't seen anything that will convince me that they're not going to have a difficult time.
Yeah, I think they're still on the outside looking in. Josh, what do you got for us?
Well, guys, it appears the Carolina Hurricanes now are the front runners for the Connor McDavid sweepstakes. Big blow happened on Saturday. Eric Stahl suffering a upper body injury when he took a hard hit from Matt Martin. He is now not going to be playing tomorrow night, and there's some concerns about the dreaded C word again here. He did come back Saturday, played bits and parts of the second and third period, left with 11 minutes left in the final frame. And again, some cause for concern that there could be the dreaded C word now with Eric Stahl. You already had Jordan Stahl out. You had Jeff Skinner suffering already from concussion-like symptoms. Not looking good right now in Carolina, guys.
And it was funny because as part of the Sportsnet broadcast, Elliot Friedman, who I have a lot of respect for, he was mentioning that Eric Stahl, that there were a number of teams that had sent scouts to watch Carolina. I play the Islanders, I believe it was on Friday night. It was the only game on the schedule, so that was a contributing factor to so many scouts being there. But also there has been speculation that with Jordan Stahl out, with Skinner, questionable, that maybe they would start going down the road of possibly entertaining the idea of trading Eric Stahl, and some teams might be just doing their due diligence. But if he starts having concussion problems, an ongoing problem, an $8 million salary for 2 years, and touch him.
Lost you a little bit there, Mike. You kind of faded out. But yeah, no, I got the point. Your internet's a little bit wacky, but this is horrible news. Although, there was word today that Jeff Skinner could be back sooner than expected. Let's hope for that. Although, I just worry about rushing. I hope they don't feel like they're in a position to rush these guys because Jeff Skinner's has a lot of concussions to rush back.
I think he's had 4 in the last 2.5 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what part of what I was saying was missed, but I was just saying with a guy like Stahl who's making $8.25 million for 2 more, I believe it's 2 more years. Teams that might be interested in trading for like a big center, if there's concussion problems, that's a big warning sign. So I mean, it might scare people away if Carolina and Ron Francis decides to go down that road. It's too early in the season to make that kind of judgment. I think just teams are preparing themselves for the possibility. But if this is a serious injury and an ongoing problem, it's going to be a problem for Carolina down the road.
I mean, normally I sort of discount any rumors about a superstar being traded, but I think there's logic to this for a variety of reasons. Number one, I think Carolina right now doesn't have the right mix, and they know they don't have the right mix. It's sort of hard to see, how this team emerges as a better team. They are what they are. They have some younger players, but not the kind of younger players that are going to turn this franchise around. And the way they could get those players is if they could trade someone like Eric Stahl. Secondly, even though his salary cap hit us just over $8 million, I believe that the salary owed to him might be over $9 million for the next 2 seasons as well. So, and that's a big amount of money. I don't think their revenue stream isn't the New York or Toronto revenue stream. It's a lot less. So that's a big chunk of money as well. So, and there's a benefit to be in the hunt for Eichel or Connor McDavid. So there's a lot of factors that would go into this decision. And as I said, generally I would sort of discount any talk of trading a superstar of his magnitude. I mean, really, he's the face of the team. But in these circumstances, I could see it. I mean, I think they know they're not a Stanley Cup contender, and they really do need some good younger players. But it would have to be a special circumstance trade where they got a good young center back, and again, Stahl coming off maybe his worst season last year. I mean,
yeah,
look at it, but probably his worst season. Wasn't up to his standards. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And obviously, if it's going to happen, I think it would happen later.
You're dead on, Kevin. He's got this year and next year. He makes 9.25 this year, 9.5 next year.
Yeah, I mean that's just it's a big hit. It's a big nut for a smaller market team in terms of their revenue stream if they're not getting great benefit for it. And I think there's sort of an undertone around the league that Eric Stahl might need a change of address to get him fired up again. That maybe he's a little bit discouraged by what's going on there in Carolina. So I mean, it's not like when I look at their team, there's some talented players on that, but it just doesn't seem like it's the right mix to move forward. And I don't see. You need a changing element coming in from underneath. Yeah. And, in Buffalo, we see that changing element. They've got a lot of good young players that are coming up, and they know, what's coming and how that's, going to make an impact. The Red Wings saw that last year when they had Tatar and Nyquist, and these are guys, Yurko, that were coming up. I don't see that same changing element in Carolina. So for that reason, I think it does make some sense for them to at least get the idea of so.
I'm with you on that.
It has to be a bold trade. It has to be a big trade.
It has. There's not many teams that can do it. It's pretty limiting to if this trade's going to happen. It's going to happen in very specific places because there's very few teams that could even do it.
Yeah, but the thing is that it's with Carolina and their current financial situation. Okay, it's an $8.25 million cap hit, but they're probably going to have to take another big salary back, and they probably don't want to take somebody who's got a long-term deal unless it's somebody young.
They're going to have to keep some of that. They're going to have to eat some of that salary too, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it would have been much easier for them to trade him last summer, which, I think I'm just guessing here, but I think they had to have considered it last summer.
I'm hearing that it was being entertained last summer. Calgary I think came up a couple times. But yeah, you're right. It would have been easier then. Also, our buddy Don Cherry, Mike, had some comments this weekend that are interesting to discuss.
Well,
explain what was said.
Okay, this has been an ongoing theme for Don, and don't get me wrong. I've grown up watching Don Cherry. I like him. I like Coach's Corner. I like the brand of hockey that he promotes, and I respect the fact that he is promoting and wants, especially the Maple Leafs, based in Ontario, to draft Ontario-born and Canadian players. But the first thing he does in Coach's Corner for the new Sportsnet Rogers coverage is rip on the Maple Leafs of their 6 draft picks or 7 draft picks. They picked no Canadians. They picked 6 picks, 2 Swedes, 1 Russian, and 3 Americans. And ripping on the fact that they picked William Nylander at number 8 and passed Nick Ritchie, who was drafted a couple picks after by Anaheim, and just don't get me wrong. I understand the parochial nature of Don Cherry. That he's always going to be that way. But this is an international game, and honestly, you cannot just draft players who come from Oakville and Mississauga. You have to draft players from all over the world and players who have the most talent. They have drafted, and the funny thing is, over the last few years, they have drafted a lot of kids from the Ontario Hockey League. Stuart Percy, who we were mentioning before, he's a kid from Oakville, played in the OHL, played for the Marlies.
They have from around there, right?
Yeah, they have a lot of depth players that a lot of players who were lower picks who they drafted in the OHL. And what Don doesn't realize, and we were going into this draft saying this draft was not exactly deep, and a lot of teams took the approach of let's take a lot of American college players, let's take a lot of foreign guys who we can hold on to for 3 or 4 years, let them develop. And that's what the Leafs did. They took 3 U.S. high school kids who were all going to university. They're all going to play 3 or 4 years in college. And then when they're 21 or 22 years old, they have a better idea of what these players are. Whereas if you draft somebody in the OHL, in a weak draft, in 2 years you have to make a determination of whether you sign them to an entry-level deal or you let them walk. So I understand what he was doing, but he was off base.
This is like shooting fish in a barrel to me for Don Cherry. I mean, mentioning that the Maple Leafs don't draft Canadian players to a Hockey Night in Canada crowd is really about as easy as it gets. I mean, this is laziness, and that's the thing that bothers me. If you have all summer to come up with something, this is your first broadcast, like you say, on a new network. This is like going out there and saying, that he thinks Crosby sucks. I mean, whatever. This is just so simple. Kevin, your thoughts? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, everybody has moved on beyond the geography and the birthplaces, the passports that these players have.
Right.
It's all about the individual. But Don hasn't yet moved on. And hey, look, I can be respectful of because people I know and trust, some of them believe that if you've got a tie going and you've got a player who's played in a Ontario Hockey League, it's similar to the NHL in terms of schedule length and so forth, and maybe we should try to pick up a few of those guys. But for the most part, I think no one pays attention to nationality. It's just about the skill of the player, and So I thought it was. I agree with you completely. I thought he took the opportunity of the first broadcast to. It's kind of like a famous band coming in and playing one of their hits right off the bat. To get everybody charged up. That's what he did.
Yeah.
In the last 2 drafts before this year, they drafted the majority of the players they drafted were Canadian. And he makes the point that the LA Kings, I think he said 15 of the players on the LA Kings roster were from the Ontario Hockey League. That's all fine and good. One thing, it's like he's diminishing the players that come from the Quebec Major Junior League or from the WHL and promoting the Ontario Hockey League. Why? Because he's based in Toronto and he goes to all these organizations and there's
an agenda. There's an agenda of some kind. Come on.
Well, and he used to be an owner of an OHL team, so I get it. And you know what? His job and one of the things he prides himself on is promoting young players in Toronto and in Ontario, and I completely support him for that. But the Leafs cannot have scouts just in Ontario. They have to have scouts in Finland, in Russia, in Sweden, in the U.S.
Yeah, and let's admit, Don Cherry was the owner of an OHL team when you could either buy an OHL team or put a deck on your house. I mean, it wasn't like it was a long time ago. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal to own an OHL team. And the Leafs do have more players named Nazem than anyone else in the league. I think that should be thrown out there, too.
He doesn't have a problem with him. He's from London, Ontario, and he was part of the OHL, so he signs off on Kadri. But, Morgan Riley's from the Western Hockey League. He's from Vancouver. That's like, being from Mars.
Western Hockey League guys are only cool if they're defensemen, right? Isn't that the way it works with Don Cherry? I mean, that's as you want the Western Hockey cornbread-fed defenseman. That's the. I mean, the whole thing is a little bit parochial. And a little bit, but this is the thing. And as we sit there and say, Kevin, you sit there and say people have moved past this. They just haven't. And I think that the reality of it is that he is saying this because they haven't, and he knows that there's going to be people.
I say the NHL teams have moved past.
The NHL teams have, yeah.
I think it still plays well to the Canadian, population. And it's interesting to note. I mean, I just looked at the nationalities of the players yesterday. I'm actually writing a story about this, and I looked at the Americans, and they were at 22.5%. I looked at the Russians; their hold is slipping. There was only 18 of them who played in the first game. With everybody had played one game, there were only 18 Russians who were in that group, which is really kind of shocking. But I think that reflects sort of the change at the KHL coming in and the fear that the Russian players are not going to come over here, at least not right away. So the NHL has changed. Through the years, and almost all NHL executives, if not all of them, accept that. I don't think they pay that much attention to where the guys played. They're more interested in their ability. But the fan population, particularly in Canada, and I think Jerry played it. I agree with Mike too, though. Don't you really enjoy it when he singles out some OHL players on his broadcast and sort of celebrates their accomplishments? Because it's usually sort of a third liner or a journeyman or a tough guy, and I actually enjoy that. I think it's sort of his shtick, and I think that works. By the way, I really like sort of celebrates a Canadian player for just being a hard-working NHL player.
See, I like that too. I do. To me, that's like this is Hockey Night in Canada you're watching. That's what it feels like to me. Okay, we're watching Hockey Night in Canada. That's cool. He's talking about Canadian players. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I love that, and a good story like like I'm sure that if he keeps playing the way he has played in the first 3 games, that you will see David Clarkson, shown on Coach's Corner. This is the guy that the Leafs really wanted. This is the way he's playing. A good boy from Mimico, Ontario. Blah blah blah.
Right.
And you know what? That's
going to Joe's Stick Shop at the corner of Main and 3rd.
I'm from Buffalo. I'm an American, but I eat that stuff up because I love Canada. I love Canadian hockey. That's the hockey that I was raised on. But there are other hockey players out there, and there are players like from Finland who play like Canadians. I mean, Leo Komarov is one of the more popular players on the Maple Leafs. He was born in Estonia and played for Finland in the Olympics. And Leaf fans love him because he plays a Canadian style, a rough style of hockey.
Yeah, no, and they should, and that's they should love him. I mean, it has nothing to do with where they're from, obviously. And I get, like you say, we get it. That Russian thing, though, is really more interesting to me, Kevin. I mean, that's a really incredible number, and to me, it really plays on the economic situation in Russia, which is something you always figured had to eventually catch up with the Russian players, right? Because there was a time when the Russian government would still take their best hockey players and train them and put them out there, and then but the rinks have disappeared, and the money. And if you think about 18-year-olds go back 18 years in Russia, and it was a pretty scary place.
Well, I mean, I think what it really reflects is if you can't be a star over here, you might as well play in Russia. Your friends and family are back there because the money they're paying these guys is significant now. And don't forget the entry level as a Russian player. If you're, say, a B star, not an A star, but if you're a B star, you can make much more money over there than you can over here because you got to deal with the entry level. So, it's a variety of factors. They're not quite sure when the player is going to come over. It's the fact that they're in competition with the KHL. I don't think it really reflects that they don't think there's talent over there. There's a lot of players who are in the KHL who could certainly play on NHL rosters. But although I would say that I'm not so sure the KHL is quite as strong as the Russians believe it is.
Well, there's been an interesting unfolding in the last few days regarding you saw players like Matthew Lombardi sign with the Rangers, Peter Mueller sign with St. Louis, Contiola, the Finn, signed with the Leafs over the summer. Contiola is playing in the American Hockey League, but Lombardi didn't make the Rangers and refused the assignment to the American League team in Hartford. Mueller rejected the being sent down to the AHL by the Blues. They went back to Switzerland. Instead of going back to the American Hockey League and trying to, get back to the NHL, if they couldn't make the NHL out of training camp, they had contracts waiting in Switzerland, and they went back. And that might be the dynamic here, where you have these players. If they can make the NHL, they'll stay. But if they're going to go to the minor leagues, they would rather go back to their homeland or go back someplace like Switzerland, where the schedule's a lot easier and things like that.
Just noticing something as I brought up the game tracker for the Colorado Avalanche Boston Bruins game to see what was going on, to see if the Avalanche had indeed scored, which they haven't. They're about 2 minutes away from going 10 periods without scoring. But Nathan McKinnon and Alex Tanguay are now flanked by Danny Briere. There's some interesting line combinations. There's some interesting line shifting going on there by Patrick Waugh early on, as we go here. And now we've got Talbot, McLeod, and Marc-Andre Clichet. So there's
I wonder if Michel Therrien sees that lineup. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure. But no, I'm just saying that it's gotten to the point where they obviously have to do something there, and they're making their move. It's a battle of backup goalies too. Redo Berra versus Nicholas Svedberg in that game.
Well, Colorado plays tomorrow night in Toronto, so they're playing back to
But they'll score then.
You would think so. That might be their litmus test. If they don't score against Toronto, they got real problems.
Yeah. So when's how many games until Patrick Waugh gets axed here? What are we thinking?
Come on.
Start a rumor. This was Philadelphia. You didn't score for 3 games, you're in trouble.
Did you guys see the Eric Johnson elbow the other night, by the way, since we're talking Avalanche?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay.
Who did he take?
I didn't think it looked too bad, and he got kicked out of the game, and they said that there wasn't going to be any other supplementary discipline. I didn't think it was bad, but he got kicked out of the game for it.
No, I mean it's one of the things I've actually been kind of happy about is the fact that we haven't had suspensions, and this is kind of rare that we go through the first 2 weeks of the league without a suspension. Did
we have like 8 by now last year?
You just cursed
us. Time of year when suspensions are handed out like candy at Halloween. This is when you can get suspended very easily because the NHL is trying to say something.
You just cursed us. There's going to be something.
We're going to get 3 tonight.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, normally we're talking about disrespect, and I mean there has been a typical staged fighting thing breaking out, but to me that's a staged discussion about staged fighting because it's really not that big of a deal anymore. So I don't know. That's just my opinion on staged fighting. But yeah, wow, interesting stuff.
We were down below 1,000 fighting majors last season for the first time, and when you look at it, it was over 1,500 before we lost the season, and it's really been on the decline for the last 4 or 5 years. And we all saw what happened, obviously, with the tough guys not finding work. I mean, the fact that George Peros is one of the more popular guys, tough guys in NHL history, and he's out of work, and Barch is out of work, and there's a lot of guys who normally would be in the lineup now, even with fighting being curtailed. So I think this is probably a turning point for fighting in the game. But I don't see there's any movement to legislate it out of the game. I think it'll just sort of over time just kind of slip away until you'll just see a few fights every year.
Or counterpoint to that real quickly before we go, and this could be the end of the show today. Are we seeing the cyclical thing that happens when fighting diminishes away, teams get rid of their enforcers, and then one team comes around and just beats the hell out of everybody else? We've seen that in the past in the NHL where that we've seen this dip sort of, and then there's the idea of like, well, wait, if we don't have any enforcers, then someone's going to get hurt, and then suddenly there's a fight. There's a team that's having a lot of success because maybe they bring in the next level of enforcers, which are guys that can actually skate, that are big and that can score, but they're also fighters, and they're going to come in and they're going to, because I don't think you can just go with a fighter anymore. I do think that era is ending.
Well, and a lot of let's just say the American Hockey League is going to resemble the league from Slapshot because all these enforcers are down there right now. I know that the Toronto Marlies have 3 or 4 guys who you could characterize as enforcers, and they have to rotate, play them on a rotating basis. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Ak, I mean, there's going to be a sort of a morphing of the enforcer role. It's got to be somebody who can penalty kill, or can play special teams, or can be a checker as well as being an enforcer. The one-dimensional enforcer fighter in the NHL is done because those 12 forward spots or those 6 defensive spots are too valuable. You just can't have a guy who plays 2 or 3 minutes. He has to be able to play at least 10 minutes.
Yeah.
One thing I want to point out, guys, last year at this time we already had 10 suspensions.
There you go.
We've had none so far. So we had 7, 8 preseason suspensions. 7 preseason suspensions and 3 regular season suspensions. including a couple of 10-game suspensions.
Yeah,
You had the
Clarkson.
Coletta 10-game illegal check to the head of Jack Johnson, then he got 10 games.
Yeah.
You have the Clarkson automatic 10-game, and you have the Paul Bissonnette automatic 10-game. So
Right.
total of 10 suspensions at this point last year.
I like the smile on Josh's face. He likes suspensions, I think.
Oh, I just think
Good
it's
for the game.
crazy that there was so many suspensions last year at this point, and right now we've had 0.
See, my fear is that the Hockey Buzzcast will run out of things to talk about in about 4 days because we need suspensions. We need them to come in. We're coming to the end of our.
No,
One final thing about fighting,
Yeah.
and that is that if you're looking for an opportunity when there might be an uptick of it, I would throw this theory out. If the NHL expands, because generally, expansion general managers are looking for a way to entertain fans while they're building their team, and historically, they've done that by having tough teams.
Great
so
point.
I could see when we hit an expansion, we could have, depending whether we have 2 teams or more, I could see those teams having some rugged hombres on their team on the roster.
That's an excellent point. I love that, and I just don't think fighting is going away. I don't think so. I think it's going to come back in that way. I think you're absolutely right, Mike.
The one concern I have, and we've talked about the fact that Toronto got rid of, and I know not to just talk about Toronto, but this is a pertinent example, that they got rid of Colton Orr and Fraser McLaren, and they're down in the minors now. In the game on Saturday against Pittsburgh in the third period, just to stand up or just to show his frustration and maybe change momentum in a way, James Van Riemsdyk gets into a fight. You don't want James Van Riemsdyk getting
Ryan Nugent-Hopkins got into a fight this weekend.
Okay. I understand, sometimes it shows, the esprit de corps of a team. It's, okay, this guy doesn't fight.
James Van Riemsdyk hasn't fought anybody since he was trying to get tickets at the Short Hills Mall back in 1996.
And he got his clock cleaned by whatever Pittsburgh defenseman he fought.
Right.
But you don't want your skill players breaking their hand on somebody's helmet. You don't want Phil Kessel to fight. You don't want James.
I look at Colorado right now. Yeah, you're right. But I look at Colorado right now and I say to myself, okay, if this was the Flyers and they'd gone 10 periods without scoring a goal, someone would be out for blood to try to at least turn things around and say, okay, we're going to go out there and I'm going to do something. I mean, this is when Hartnell or
I was going to say. Isn't that guy in Columbus now?
Yeah, that guy's in Columbus now, right? But this is when, okay, we'll say Zach Ronaldo or whatever would go after somebody and just start a fight to rally the troops. But you look at the Columbus Blue Jackets lineup and they don't have that guy. Who is that? Who's going to do that? They really have gone to more of a skilled lineup throughout. So.
Yeah, but we've evolved a little bit. I think the way to do that now is you lay a big hit.
Yeah.
Someone, but. I do recognize that that's still part of the game. One of the reasons for fighting is to inspire your teammates, to get everybody riled up, to remind everyone that your heart's still beating. So,
right.
Let's get out there. But
lose the battle, win the war. That's what it was all about. It's like, okay, we're gonna win in the long run. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Well, we'll be back tomorrow, guys, with the Hockey Buzzcast, and. You got something else, Josh? Sorry, let's go to you real quick.
Actually, I was just going to point out the fact that I was a little concerned because I picked the Avalanche to do a lot of great things this year, and they've gone now 7 periods without scoring a goal.
10? No, 7. Yeah, 7. Sorry, 7.
And there was some cause for concern there a little bit.
So you're the one to blame, Josh.
Blame it on me. I went and got that Nathan McKinnon jersey. I think a little too early, maybe.
Okay.
You cursed them.
I'm going to make sure Patrick Waugh gives you a call later and calms you down. I think you'll be all right. I think they'll be okay. But there's too much talent in this team not to ever score a goal again. But right now, it must feel like they're never going to score a goal again. You've been around teams that go this kind of thing, and it's ugly. I certainly wouldn't want to be selling something to the Colorado Avalanche now. In the front office or anywhere around that team. It's got to be an ugly scene as they go through this. Guys, we'll talk again tomorrow when maybe Colorado would have scored a goal. And we'll have more information for you then. You can follow Kevin Allen at @KevinAllen on Twitter, and Josh is NHL Josh Rimmer. No, is that right?
Josh Rimmer Hockey.
Josh Rimmer Hockey. I always screw that up. I'm sorry.
All right.
Michael is at Mike in Buffalo. I'm at Eklund, and make sure you follow everybody because these guys are way more interesting 24 hours a day than you'd imagine. Remember, guys, without the buzz, then you wouldn't be able to tell from this last hour.
We're way more interesting on Twitter than we are in person.
Way more interesting than you would be able to tell from this viewing right now. I'm just kidding. Guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Talk to you soon.